Welcome to In Harmony with Nature. I'm your host, Shalom Mandeville. Today's topic is an extremely important topic. It's titled Erosion Control and Erosion and Sediment Control. We had numerous shows on this topic, and so we're going to keep continuing discussing this topic until people involved in the development and construction industry try to do their best to minimize erosion. You can't get rid of it completely, but you can try to reduce the erosion and its transport. Recently, I checked several sites in Sackville, Bedford, and Dartmouth, and it was absolutely disgusting that a majority of the people involved in the construction industry did not practice even the fundamentals of sediment control. So I ask, if any of you are watching this show, I request that you approach your consultant for proper measures. Today I have with me an expert in erosion and sediment control, Mr. John Theakston. He's a professional engineer, and he works at the Nova Scotia Department of Environment. He's the author of the new Sediment and Erosion Control Manual. Mr. Theakston, what is erosion and sediment control?
Well, I look at it as sort of two processes. You talk about erosion control and then sediment control. Erosion control is just stopping the erosion of the soil due to the rainfall that falls on top of it, or water that flows over it. I'm going to talk tonight about various ways in which that can be done in a practical and efficient manner, but sediment control is another way of reducing the problem before the soil washes away off the site, and it may end up in a stream or a lake. It's kind of a way of controlling the sediment at the boundary of a construction project, for example. A sedimentation pond might be an example of that, which I won't be going into tonight, I guess, but I wanted to show some of the practical and easy ways, and some of the common sense ways that are being used to control the soil erosion.
Before we go into that, you were saying that the measures were practiced by Sobey's group on Downsview Mall were really revolutionary, right?
Well, I wouldn't say revolutionary. The only thing that was perhaps unique about that site was the sedimentation pond that they had and the use of a flocculant. I haven't seen that used before, and it's been used a few times since. And there is a company in the metropolitan area which has the information on the proper type of flocculant to use. And I don't know too much about that. So.
What's the flocculant used?
Well, it's kind of like the flocculant they used in the sedimentation process or filtration process in a water treatment plant. Mm-hmm. And it's a sort of a chemical reaction in which the very fine soil particles are bound together in a clump, and then they become heavy if they're in a pond. Mm-hmm. And they'll fall out to the bottom, and hopefully they'll clean up the water that's been muddied by siltation.
So it decreases the settling time quite a bit.
Yeah.
Because what was the settling time for clay particles? Something like 25 years?
Well, that's right. Clay is so very fine, and the way it just sits in the water, and then the adhesion and the chemical makeup of the water holding up that clay particle. It can hold the clay particle in suspension for years, versus a heavier sand particle or gravel. Naturally, it will settle out to the bottom in a few seconds or in a few minutes.
Well, I guess we should see your slides now.
Okay, well, I wanted to start off by just explaining briefly that the soil erosion is the wearing away of the land. Siltation is the term that we use when the soil is transported away and deposited in a watercourse, and that causes pollution. And I'll you've had many guests on before talking about how sediment will impact on fish. For example, how it will smother them by covering their gills and making water unfit to drink. Construction and earth moving and land clearing speeds up the erosion process much faster. Mother Nature does that in a long, long time. So the way I approach the problem is that, just as the title of your program says, do it in harmony with nature. And by showing some of these slides now, perhaps I can illustrate what I mean.
If you don't mind, before we start, can you mention something about the manual that you prepared?
Well, I'm not the sole author of that, by the way. There's other people, Don Gray and Gerald Porter, are other people in my department that helped me work on that. And I had advice from people that I know at the Federal Fisheries Department and so on. It's we found that in the Department of the Environment there's so many complaints about siltation of streams and sediment pollution, and perhaps people didn't realize the seriousness of it. So we wanted to put together a handbook, and there are handbooks available to consultants, but and there are handbooks available in other jurisdictions, other provinces. But we thought if we had one tailored to Nova Scotia with Nova Scotia examples, that we could give that to contractors and the foremen that work for contractors, and make it common sense so that they will see through the use of photographs and sketches just how the proper erosion and sediment control techniques can be applied. So there's a whole host of things in there, and I guess some of the slides I'm going to show are taken out of the handbook, and they'll show practical examples of erosion control and how to protect soil against the impact of rain, and also sediment control. This first slide just shows what I wanted to say about working in harmony with nature. The fact that Mother Nature takes care of erosion. Erosion occurs over a very long period of time, but if slopes around a lake like that are kept under forest cover or under vegetation, then the soil would be protected and not washed away when it rains. During construction, land is cleared of its forest cover, and the soil is left bare so that it's subject to the impact of rain. Now, if this sketch shows, for example, that land was going to be cleared for a housing development and no erosion controls are used, then that lake just down below there will turn brown very quickly from siltation by the time the people move into the new homes that are going to be built on that property. And here's an example of that. This is First Lake out in Sackville, where lots of housing development was going on in the 1970s, and little thought was given to erosion control and siltation control, and as a result the lake turned brown and stayed brown for a very long time. And if the camera is able to pan up in the left-hand corner, there is a second lake which is nearby, and there was no development occurring at that time, so you can see the contrast between a clear lake and a lake that has been heavily silted. And this shows the effect on fish, where the sediment covers the gills of the fish, and it can kill fish in a very long time, a very quick time rather, if they don't have time to adapt to the heavy siltation, and if they don't have time to evade the problem. And this is how very quickly how the erosion occurs by raindrops falling on a very heavy rainstorm. The drops are quite large. And they fall with a great velocity, so that when they do hit the soil, it's like a tiny bomb striking the surface of the soil, and the particles are detached and thrown into suspension, and they're washed away very quickly. This site is one that is located in Bedford, and I took this picture during a very heavy rainfall, a downpour, and the fact that there's a very steep slope there in the background, it had no protective cover on it. And within minutes, there was just from the rainfall falling on that site, which could have been about an acre or less in size, there was a very heavy concentration of muddy water that formed. It was just like a river flowing off the site. So by observing those kinds of processes and understanding how they happen, just by observing nature, we can recognize the causes, and then to me the controls become obvious, I think. For example, here I don't think that this housing development is being carried out in harmony with nature. All of the trees have been stripped away, and the houses are constructed on the top of a very steep slope. The problem is obvious there, in that there are gullies forming down on the surface of that slope. The cause, I think, is obvious too, in that there's no vegetative cover left on the slope, so that rain hitting it, as I showed, those raindrops would strike and start the erosion process. There's water probably washing down over top of the slope. That will also erode the slope. The solution then should become obvious. The fact simply doing as Mother Nature does to cover up the slope somehow. For example, sod could be used or something of that nature during the landscaping. And the landscaping should be done very quickly without much delay there too. So shrubbery and that kind of thing will take the impact of the rain falling on it. And here's a practical example of a temporary erosion control where a slope that was left bare for a while in a subdivision. The lots were not being sold, so therefore the developer realized that erosion would occur, and a thick layer of hay or straw mulch was used. And again, that absorbs the impact of the rain falling on it, and it will also help to retard the flow of water, and therefore in turn retard the erosion that is occurring. And if something like that's going to be left for a lengthier period of time than some of the other erosion and sediment control measures that we talked about earlier, such as sedimentation ponds, should probably be used in conjunction with this. This is just one technique. Well, this is a site in Dartmouth. Again, some lots were built upon, and other lots were left unsold for a while. So there were some complaints of siltation of a lake, and the developer decided he would use polyethylene as a temporary cover. It's effective. It's fairly easy to put down, I would think. The only trouble with something like this is that it requires a great deal of watching to see that there's no damage done to the polyethylene and that it doesn't blow away. So it's a little more work involved in maintaining, and the maintenance of erosion control devices is so important. Sod is a very quick and effective way also of dealing with an erosion problem. There on the left, the lawn has been sodded. That's not eroding. But looking back there in the background, there is a slope which has been left unprotected, and there is a gully erosion because of that. And the other point I wanted to show in this slide is the fact that when erosion does occur, the sediment is washed away. It can be washed away quite a distance from the source of the sediment, source of the erosion. And in this case, there is a highway ditch here which is filled up. And this is out near Truro. And I was told by the highway crews that they had to go back 2 or 3 times within just a few months and keep cleaning that out. And there's a line of sediment there. You can see the sediment was 2 or 3 feet deep in that ditch. And that's just coming from one site there in the background. So again, to emphasize that erosion will be accelerated when there's no cover on the slope due to the fact that there's no cover and the fact that this will happen very quickly over a short period of time. This is an example in Dartmouth where there was a bare slope and rain was washing down over it and created a gully in the side of the hill. And the soil that was washed away there was washed across the highway and into a lake. So sod was used. And this is a shot just a couple of months later in which the property was graded and sod was laid down. And the way sod works is, again, just like Mother Nature, to cover the soil it will take the impact of the raindrops, but it will also slow down the rain, the water that is washing down over the slope, so that it doesn't get a chance to concentrate and form a gully. If left for a long period of time, some slopes, Mother Nature will flatten out some slopes. Visualize, for example, maybe a mudslide that occurs after several days of heavy rain. Well, on a construction site, that same principle can be put into effect, and terraces can be sloped so that a slope that is fairly steep can be leveled off in benches, and that will help to retard the erosion. And perhaps this doesn't show up too well, but once a slope is graded, it can be hydroseeded right away, or seeded or protected somehow. And in this case, this was the Micmac Park Low that was under construction. And when the engineers had finished grading the slope, it was hydroseeded right away to get some vegetation growing, even though the rest of the park low was still under construction. At least temporarily, they were finished with the slope and able to hydroseed it. And here's just what hydroseeding, for anybody that doesn't know. It's a slurry of seed and lime, fertilizer that's mixed in with water, and then it's blown right onto a site, so it can cover a site very quickly and get the seeding, the germinating started very rapidly. Another way of protecting the slope is through the use of an erosion control blanket. Some slopes are sort of inaccessible to get equipment on for grading or for doing the terracing technique that I mentioned. So by using this erosion control blanket that's available commercially, laborers can go on the site and roll it out and stake it down, and that can be done very quickly. Some of those things are expensive, but after I show my slides, I'll try and show you an example of what those blankets look like. And they have seed right in them to assist in the germination and getting the slope covered with vegetation. Here's a site that was graded. Well, that's one erosion control technique. It looks to me also that it was seeded and some grass is starting to grow, but the serious erosion problem that is occurring there is the fact that water is concentrating at the top of the slope, and it's found a spot in the middle of the slope in which a gully is forming. This is sometimes very expensive to control just by regrading it, so there are various ways and means of protecting a gully like that. And for example, this is one over in Dartmouth where the city of Dartmouth engineering staff used gabion baskets. You know, those gabion baskets, they're made of wire mesh and they're filled with rock, so the water that is coming down over the top of a slope cannot erode the bare soil. It will tumble down over the rock and the energy will dissipate. And those kinds of gabion baskets are good where the site is inaccessible also to machinery, which I assume was the case here because it is located at the back of a housing subdivision. It would be rather difficult to get heavy machinery in. Now that kind of thing is labor intensive. These are those I just talked about, I guess, are erosion control techniques, and this is where I sort of differentiate between erosion and sediment control. Here, I look at this as a sediment control measure. It's a type of a barrier in which it can separate the construction site from a property boundary or a watercourse. The barrier here in this case is straw bales. This wasn't entirely effective. This was used in Bedford along the Sackville River. I think it would have been more effective if the bales had been staked into the ground and some straw was put in between the bales. Really, these bales are not intended to filter the sediment, but they just slow down the water and enable some sediment to settle out behind them. And again, many other erosion and sediment control techniques probably should be used on the site. This is kind of a last-ditch effort along the boundary. This is what's known as a silt fence, the common term. It's a geotextile fabric, and it will do the trick of filtering the sediment, the larger particles, which is this gentleman is trying to demonstrate. Some of the larger soil particles have been slowed up behind it, and they've been trapped on the fabric, and that protects the slope down below, so that any seeding that was done on the other side of the silt fence will not be damaged by water that is flowing down across the site. So that kind of fabric will help to filter and retain some soil. But as you and I know many times, and you just alluded to it in your introductory remarks, that even though erosion control devices are used, they have to be maintained. And this geotextile is not being maintained. Whoever put it in is really not watching what's happening there, because it's obvious that the water is getting underneath the silt fence in one spot, so that it's just ineffective as an erosion and sediment control. So those are the end of the slides, and if the camera can zoom in on this, this is the erosion control blanket that I talked about, just one example. And we don't intend to endorse the brand name on this, but I just brought it along as an example. This, if perhaps we can see the string here, it's a blanket, it's tied together, and there's straw, and in this example it says that there is straw and a coconut fiber blanket. So that will act as a mulch, and on the back is sort of a filter fabric. So when this is put down on the site, it will act as a mulch, so that any seeding that has been done will have moisture retention. The seed will then start to grow. The grass will grow up through the blanket. And this also probably has seed right in the straw or the hay, and that will also take root and germinate. So it's a very effective way of covering a large slope quickly and getting that vegetation. So in my summary remarks, I just want to say that I look at erosion control and sediment control working in harmony with nature by observing how Mother Nature causes erosion. There's no reason why people can't follow the same advice, and those are just very quick examples of how, first of all, the slope should be covered up again to protect the soil and not leave it bare for any length of time, and stopping the sediment before it washes off into a lake or a stream.
This mat here, do you need this in addition to hydroseeding? I suppose you do, right?
I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably better. The hydroseeding takes effect quickly, and I think if seed was spread by hand, perhaps that would help by giving it a protective cover until it germinates. I haven't seen too many of these used locally. They are available locally, and there's been inquiries about them, but I haven't seen them used.
Because if you have steep slopes and clay, I don't think hydroseeding would work, because it was we had tried in a few areas and it didn't work.
Yeah.
Because the seed didn't,
it didn't have time to grow before,
clay.
Because naturally the seed will take time to germinate and to grow, and if you put down a sod, it's already there by the landscaping company, and it's a thick mat.
Yeah.
But seed will take time to grow in, and a thatch to develop, and a good sod, and a good root system. But in the meantime, if you have clay, as you said, the rain will hit it and start to wash it away.
Clay anyway.
No, and then we've seen some clay soils that just bake in the sun, and they become too hard to get seed on it.
So I'm just wondering, this would work in that case then?
Yes, it would certainly help. Yeah.
Because
Oh, yeah.
Do you have a rough idea of the cost?
No, I don't. I haven't seen it used, and we haven't used it, but I wouldn't even hazard a guess. I guess it's fairly expensive. Some of those devices are expensive, but if you look at the cost of a large highway alignment, some of these erosion control devices are only 1% or 0.5% of the cost of the total project. And environmentally speaking, it's well worth the price, I think.
Down in the same job we were talking about, down on downstream, now the old Sackville Downs property. What they also did on the steep, they had very steep slopes, so they directed the water, and they had some kind of a, like an open trenches with gravel.
Yes.
That's how they directed the water.
That's a good example of that site because there were many devices used. And
Yes.
the one you referred to, I think, it was a ditch constructed right at the top of the slope and right down around the edge of the
Like
slope,
downspouts kind of thing.
so that any water coming from the land above, it was intercepted and taken away, and the ditch was lined with rock.
That's right.
So the ditch itself did not erode, and then it picked up the water instead of the water coming down over the slope and eroding the slope.
Yeah.
So any seeding that was done, it was protected, and that seed was not going to be washed away. So.
Yeah, in addition, they also, wherever they felt the gullies were there, they lined it with rock
Yes.
and gravel. And I checked it for a year and a half, and it was very good.
Is it? Well, that's good
Yeah.
to hear. Yeah.
That's probably the best job they've ever done around here.
Well, it was thorough, and I alluded to it before that you have to put so many devices into effect to get a comprehensive erosion control program in on one property. The siltation ponds, the seeding, the silt fences, the ditches, and all the grading practices, the rock, all those things have to be used, especially on a large project. I think that was at least over 20 acres, or probably more, wasn't it? So it was a large area exposed at one time.
Maybe the other thing is that if people are not willing to use them, then they have to leave large buffer strips.
Yes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The next thing is that your department is a small department, and their resources are strained now that all of us are environmentalists these days. Do you feel the municipalities should take a strong stand in these things too, through planning regulations and engineering bylaws or whatever?
Yes, there's been a lot of talk about that, and it's a matter of getting that into a bylaw. I think that the county or municipality would be able to have some teeth in it. Some of our legislation in the Environmental Protection Act and so on, we can go directly to show erosion, but I think the problem is perhaps that erosion control is kind of an environmental concern. The siltation is, at least, and there are environmental laws at the provincial level. But the implementation of these devices could go to the municipal level through the bylaws, or there are contract zoning, I think, and there's no reason why, in my opinion, the county or municipality couldn't get the contractor as part of the development agreement to put in erosion control. There's no reason why the Department of the Environment has to stand over the shoulders. As you said, the environment problem nowadays is so well known that the initiatives should start individually or county level or whatever.
Well, you have been watching the engineering solutions to siltation problems, and my guest has been John Theakston, an expert in erosion and sediment control, and he's also the main author of the environmental guidelines, the Blue Book, I call that, I guess.
Handbook, yes.
Handbook. And if you want a copy of that, it just costs $10, and you can call 424-5300. Thank you.